Ready?
Oh, hello. Oh, he's so cute.
Hey, are you ready to say hello to our guest? Okay. And how about our introduction? We're going to say hello and welcome to Pet Talk. You've got nothing to say today? Okay.
He's
Okay.
so cute, bless him.
How about hello and welcome to Pet Talk? Would you like to say that? Okay. Hello and welcome to Pet Talk with me, Anna, and what's your name? Can you be a little bit louder than that? What's your name? How how about your name? There we are. There's Teddy, and we are joined by Tom Candy today. Hello, Tom.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. And you are here because I saw you in an interview talking about something that I think is really important that we understand, and that's frustration in our dogs. So this is, I think, a very important topic. And maybe it would be good to start with, how do we know if our dogs are frustrated?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and it's really important for us to understand that because there is so much in our world at the minute, and forever, I suppose, that is frustrating because there's lots of situations that our dogs are in that if they were given the choice, they probably wouldn't want to be there, or it would look very differently in them. So, so to answer that kind of question, we've got to understand what frustration is to start with, because that's how we're going to know what we're looking for in our dogs. So, frustration is kind of described as a negative emotional feeling, um, based on a couple of factors. So that's things like where a dog is prevented from getting to something that they really want or keeping hold of something that they've already got. It can be where previous expectations haven't been met, and that's quite an important one, or where there's barriers to autonomous control. So where the dog wants to do something, but there's something preventing them achieving that goal. And it could be because they're on a lead, it could be because they're in the house and they can see the postman coming up the drive, but they can't get to them. Or it could be because they're in the car or anything like that. Anything that prevents the dog from doing something that they want to do. And the way that we can kind of see that happening in our dogs is really varied. And the reason that it's quite varied and the behaviors that we see might be quite different is because the reason that frustration exists, the reason why we get frustrated, why our dogs get frustrated, is because evolutionary, it's there to make us try harder. So when we've got a goal that we want to achieve and we're not able to do it easily, frustration is the thing that keeps us going forward, makes us try harder to work towards that goal. So we tend to see quite a big variation in behaviors that the dog's doing whilst they're trying to work out what's going to work. And they generally start off quite small, so it can be things like starting to maybe whine a little bit, padding their feet, starting to get a little bit sort of agitated, I guess you could describe it as. And then that might build up to things like barking, um, pulling on the lead more, or doing things that are a little bit more sort of higher arousal. The dog's a little bit more wound up and they're showing these behaviors. And a great example of that is sort of in the evening while I'm sat down eating my dinner with my partner, then our dog starts making a little bit of vocalization and then she'll kind of pad about the room a bit and then she'll go between us to try and work out who's going to give her food. And then if no food is forthcoming, which it often isn't, then we might get a little bit of barking occurring, and that barking might increase in frequency as she gets more and more frustrated because that goal of trying to attain food hasn't been fulfilled. So you get like this big variation. And it can be sometimes quite hard to work out when our dog is frustrated, going back to your original question, because, like I said, there's so many situations where frustration can occur for our pets. And if we think about all the times that we have our dogs on lead or have them in the house when things are happening or keeping them out of the kitchen while we're cooking, there's a lot of situations that we can see these behaviors start to occur in. That was quite a long answer.
No, it's great because just as I've been listening to you, I've been thinking about Teddy and I've been thinking about the padding. What he does is he shifts from one foot to the other. And
Yeah.
I mean it's when he's being really patient. So let's say, for instance, he knows we're going out and one of us is taking longer than he expected. And I know that he's waiting because he's facing the door. And often it's not me who he's waiting for because I'm with him. So I can see. And he starts to shift, from one side to the other, putting his weight on. And I can almost feel him going, oh, come on. Surely, surely you must be ready now. And at this point, he's actually very, very patient, but I can see he's beginning to go, oh, come on. But he's being very polite about it. Whereas other situations where, for instance, I'm getting his breakfast ready and he thinks I should have finished by now. Then there's a whine, as you've said. So I'm recognizing the things you've said. Is then there's this whine. Oh, come on, surely you can give it to me now. And then the vocalization, as you've said it, generally happens when I'm washing up and he's thinking, well, that is a useless activity because he can't be involved and there's no gain. So it's, come on, stop doing that, come over here. And that's where we get the barking. So I can recognize that. And it was the other one where you were saying about not being able to achieve a goal. I This hasn't happened for a long time, but it brought back to mind times when he was younger and he'd be playing with his friends and I'd call and he'd know that there was something tasty if he came, and they didn't quite cooperate in letting him go from what he was doing and try to interrupt him, and he'd get a bit, get out of my way. Get out of my way, I've got business to do. So yes, I can recognize all of those that you've said.
Well, I
So
think there's, yeah, so I think there's some really great examples that you've recognized there with Teddy. And I think what's really interesting about those different situations is you said about that patience, or, he's quite polite in his way when he's waiting to go for a walk. Yeah, so sometimes he's quite patient and he's able to be quite polite in his waiting. And then in other situations, which might be a little bit more exciting or more important to him, he struggles more with it. And the important thing is we're all going to feel frustrated at some time, and so are our dogs. It's impossible to live in a world where frustration doesn't happen, but it's how we cope with that frustration is the important part. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the human example is maybe if we're waiting in a queue and, we might be in the queue and we can see people in front of us and we're checking our watch and we might be huffing and puffing, but we're not sort of shoving people out of the way or pushing people out of the way or shouting at the top of our lungs. And I guess that's the kind of human equivalent is we can feel frustrated, but we know how to act in that situation. And that I think is what you were sort of describing with Teddy, which I think is really cool.
yeah, it's and people who are on their horns in the car when they
Yeah.
fast enough or somebody does something that they perceive as getting in their way. So we can recognize that in our human context, but it's easy to see that in our dogs as well if we just stop for a moment and put ourselves in their paws. I was going to say their shoes, but perhaps not. So now you were talking about the need to learn to cope with frustration. So before we get there, would it, I'm guessing that some dogs find it easier to cope with frustration than others. So what would determine a dog's ability to cope or
Yeah,
not?
that's a really great question. And there's lots of different factors that can affect how we are as people and how our dogs are as individuals. And that's things like genetics, their learning history, so what experiences have they had before and what did they learn from it? It can be the situations that they've been brought up in. So all of these factors kind of come together to determine how well a dog copes with frustration. And if we think about those genetics, some of that is sort of what their parents were like, but part of it can also be their breed. So if we've got a dog who's been bred maybe to do a very specific job, and the one that kind of jumps to mind is something like a border collie, bred to be super active, have a very clear job of controlling movement and moving those sheep about, there's going to be a lot of genetic factors there that frustration actually is quite useful for. But if we've then got a border collie who's living in a house, it's probably not as useful, but we've got that kind of genetic factor left over. So genetic genetics plays quite a big part. But then, like I said, we've also got things like previous learning history. So if they've always done something that's been super successful, and then for some reason we've changed their mind, and I've got another brilliant example of this, and it's similar to the one I just used. But previously, with our old dog, my dad used to feed her from the table and then get very frustrated when she would bark. But after about 10, 15 barks, he'd then feed her again. So her ability to cope with frustration actually got worse because every time she got frustrated, it actually resulted in her getting the thing that she wanted. So there's kind of that kind of myriad of things that make up how well a dog copes with frustration. But as you said, and I'm sure we'll talk about, there are ways that we can help our dogs cope, so that they are the more polite side of it rather than the more annoying or difficult or frustrating for us side of things.
So that's interesting because you're talking about breeds playing a part in this. So what you're describing there with the collie, I would think I could just imagine, say, spaniels, very active breeds who, if they're not given the opportunity to, I guess, release that energy by doing lots of activities, it might they might feel like they're, climbing the walls. It's that feeling of, oh, let me out, let me out, let me do something.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important to say as well that there's as much variation within a breed as outside it. So breed may play a part, but you could still have like a really chilled out collie or a spaniel who's sort of happy and go lucky and not really bothered. But there definitely is a factor there that we have to consider. And spaniels is a really great example because if we think of what they're bred to do, you know, there's somebody's out on a hunt and they shoot a bird, which is you know, so it doesn't depends on your views of hunting, but they shoot a bird and that bird lands in some thicket or some thick bush. Well, you want a spaniel who's going to get a bit frustrated because if they can't get to that bird, you want them to really try and push through that thicket, which is going to be quite difficult to get that bird. So then you're right. When you then take that and take that drive and that push to do something and just pop it in a house with not really much to do, what generally tends to happen is they then want to find their own way of kind of fulfilling that need. And often, what the dogs think is a great game and works really well for them doesn't really fit into our life. And that could be when you then see things like bits of destruction, where they may be chewing things that they shouldn't be chewing or picking things up that you don't want them to have. Um, because we're not giving them appropriate outlets for those kind of behaviors and drivers that they've naturally got built into them.
That, I recognize that with Teddy, obviously being half spaniel as well. But he is a dog that is very, very easygoing 90% of the time. But there is a particular time of the day when he's had his morning nap and he is ready to go. He doesn't have to go out, but he has to do something. So, and usually that's when I'm in the middle of chores and I'm going, okay, just half an hour. We're going out. We're half, and that's when he'll start, looking for laundry that might be drying. Uh, and he knows because, and I'm going to say to him, no, you can't do that. But then he'll go and choose a toy instead because I've taught him there are things he can't do, but he'll go and choose a toy. But I do have to interrupt what I'm doing to play with him for 2, 3 minutes, and then that gains me a few more minutes before, or I have to give him something to do. And that for him might be going into the garden and bringing in sticks in exchange for something. So yes, we can see that the busyness, but I'm also thinking about terriers who like to dig and aren't allowed to dig. It's I guess we need to be channeling their energy is what we're saying, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. Like thinking about appropriate outlets. And that's a really important thing when we consider sort of any behavior that we're seeing that we don't really like or doesn't really fit into our life. We always want to aim to provide something that's more appropriate for the dog to do so that they then don't need to do the thing that we don't want. So we're kind of removing any issues because we're teaching the dog what we want rather than what we don't want. And you said something really else that's I think is really important, particularly when we're thinking about frustration, which is, after Teddy's had his nap, he can then be kind of more aroused or more keen to do things. And that's often when we're busy, we might be working or doing other things. And that's really important because I think we often forget as well that dogs are what we call polyphasic sleepers. So they sleep at random times during the day and they're much better at taking small naps, doing something, then going back and doing a small nap. Whereas us as humans are monophasic sleepers. So we go to bed and then we wake up in the morning and that's our sleep pretty much done. Unless you've had like a big Sunday dinner or something and you have a little afternoon snooze on the sofa. And often those kind of cycles don't fit very well together. And a really great example of that is puppies, who generally tend to have kind of a twilight hour, after about between about 8 and 10 o'clock at night. And whenever I've dealt with mainly sort of puppy issues like Malvin, where the puppy's just really active, they might be barking a lot, you can pretty much always guess that it's around that time of the evening. And if we think about that time of the evening for us as people, that's generally when we're home from work, we've had our dinner, we've done the cleaning, or we've done any chores, or the kids have gone to bed, and we've just sat down to watch TV. And that's often where a lot of that conflict is created from because we're trying to rest and be calm, but the dogs are super active. And you made a really great point, which is if we know that's when our dogs are going to be active, that's when we want to have something prepared, like a stuffed Kong or some enrichment, a licky mat, something that we know is there. And then as soon as we're getting towards that time, we can give the dog something to do rather than having to wait for them to start barking or start to be annoying in inverted commas. Before we then think, oh, we should probably give them something to do. So we can be prepared to support them and make our life easier, which is very much what I'm about.
It's gosh, that's brought back memories of that Twilight Tower.
Yeah.
I'd be exhausted because having a puppy can be quite exhausting, and there was no reprieve at that time of night. And the best advice my puppy teacher ever gave me was get him bones. and so it became the chewing time, and to this day he has a chew in the evening of some sort, and he just loves that, and it's wonderful. So yeah, that's brought back memories, that one.
Yeah, it's surprising, isn't it? And this is part of the thing with puppy ownership is we often forget. So it's often been 10 plus years since we last got a puppy, and we forget that we're 10 years older and we've probably forgotten what it was like having a puppy. But I think, yeah, that's really great advice about the chew and thinking about those sort of chewing and licking activities at night time are really important because that's going to help the dog wind down and have some meaningful sleep in the same way that although most of us probably don't do it, we are supposed to not use electronics an hour before we go to bed and read a book and, just relax a bit and kind of sort ourselves out before we go to bed. A lot of us are quite bad at, well, I know I am, sort of sitting in bed still scrolling on our phones, which really affects our sleep. So it's a really great sort of comparison is thinking about, well, how do we prepare our dogs for sleep when they're already starting to be a bit more riled up anyway?
Yeah, it's true actually. I'd forgotten about that point about how it not only helps us by giving them something to do and it helps them, but it actually does prepare them for sleep because I do remember that it he was ready to go to bed at bedtime. After his chew, he'd be much calmer. And so then when it was ready for time to go to bed, he was happy to go to bed. I never had an issue with him not wanting to go to bed. So that was a blessing, I think, actually. So this is great because what we're saying is be sensitive to your dog's needs, and that helps to avoid them getting frustrated. And I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because we get frustrated if our needs aren't met.
Yeah, definitely. That's always the kind of place that we want to start when we're thinking about frustration. But again, any sort of problem behavior that we might be having with our dogs is are we kind of meeting those basic needs? And there's a really great pyramid that was created by Linda Michaels, which kind of talks about dogs' needs. And we have to make sure that we complete each sort of step of the pyramid before we actually get to training and behavior, which sits at the top, or the cognitive needs of the dog. So we need to make sure that we are providing for those biological needs, because otherwise we're fighting a losing battle. So if we're trying to stop a behavior like barking at the window or barking at the door or barking on lead when they're out and about, for example, if we haven't kind of done that groundwork and we're not meeting those general needs, it's going to be really hard to get some successful changes in those other situations.
Because we can't train our way out of emotion. That's it. And so we need to understand the emotion behind the behavior in order to help our dogs, and then they can change the behavior. It's exactly the same thing for us. We get very frustrated with ourselves when we have habits that we want to break. We want to stop eating certain things. We want to stop drinking, whatever it is. And I'm a therapist, and people come to me very exasperated with themselves. They say, why can't I stop this? It's because we're not addressing the emotional issue that's driving the behavior. And our dogs are no different. It's the emotional need that's not been met that is driving the behavior. So we need to be a bit sensitive to that. And sometimes it feels like we have to be detectives too to work out what it is.
Yeah, and that's the really important part, isn't it? Is um, knowing your dog as an individual, because there are going to be like so many variations in our lives, but also our dogs as individuals and other factors that kind of play into that question of, well, which situations are my dogs going to struggle with? So you're right, it's about knowing the dog, and if you are then struggling with things, that's where getting some support from a pet professional can help with getting to know your dog a bit better or feeding into that specific question. But yeah, it's such an important idea is knowing what a dog's like, but also which parts they struggle with.
There was something you said right at the beginning of our conversation, which I'd like to come back to, because you were describing guarding behavior as also potentially being rooted in frustration. Can you talk us through that? Because gardening is a big thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, so one of those kind of criteria for dogs who feel frustrated, which came out of somebody's PhD. So Kevin McPeak did a PhD in frustration at the University of Lincoln and came up with that definition that I gave you at the start. And like I said, as part of that, retaining things under our control is a precursor, I suppose, for frustration. So yes, you could definitely look at a situation where a dog has maybe got something that they don't want somebody else to have, and they're using their behavior to tell us that, which might be sort of barking. It could be like lifting their teeth, showing their teeth, that sort of thing. And yeah, that is generally sort of rooted in frustration. And it's because I've got this thing and I'm doing something to try and make you go away, which could be some appeasement, so lower level signals that the dog's uncomfortable, like showing their whites of their eyes or starting to lift their lip or just being tense in the face. That's not working because you haven't moved away. So then I need to try harder, and then that might be when we then start to see the lip lifting. We might start to hear us growl or start to have an intensifying of that behavior to say, no, I really want you to move away now. And then generally the person does move away because they're worried about getting bitten. And then because of that, the dog learns, oh, well, that was really successful. So next time they're in the same situation, they're going to do the same thing again because it worked last time. So that's generally kind of how frustration fits into the resource guarding piece is the dog's outcome is, well, I want more space between the object that I've got and the thing that's approaching, which could be a person, it could be another dog. And whatever they're doing isn't being successful, so they have to try harder. So they're getting frustrated because the outcome isn't being achieved.
Could there be something there also about a history of frustration in being able to keep objects? So, for instance, if a dog keeps having things taken away from him, from her, um, then there's just this expectation that they're never allowed to keep anything, which is frustrating in itself.
Yeah, so expectations is a really important part of frustration because if that's what the foundations of it is, because if our expectations aren't met, then yeah, that's difficult. So if a dog learns every time you come up to me, you're going to take that thing away that I want, then yes, that's definitely going to become a frustrating situation. And then it's going to become predictable. So every time somebody walks up to me, I lose something very quickly that dog's going to cotton on and want to stop that approach. And then that's where what we've just talked about fits into it because they're going to try harder and harder each time until they're successful in keeping that item that they've got.
So this comes now towards how we help our dogs, because if I'm thinking about the fact that Teddy doesn't resource guard all that much, he if anything, when he grabs a toy, it's because he actually wants us to chase him, and he likes to pretend growl and do all these sounds, but it's very clear he doesn't mean it because he's quite happy to drop it, for whatever reason. But and also he's very good at sharing with his friends, and so and I think about that issue and why his friends are also pretty good at sharing, and I think it's because these are dogs who generally are very confident and trusting of the humans around them and each other, because they they've got a nice friendship going, so there's that element of trust. So I think they feel safe enough to be able to share. I think the only time that Teddy would really object is if there was something in his mouth and somebody tried to take it from him. And in fact, I think there was a dog at some point who tried to take something from him, and he made his feelings very clear on that basis. But in that instance, but so how do we help our dogs then have that confidence so that they are more tolerant? I gave I was talking about resource guarding as an example, but generally speaking, how do we do that?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And I think there's quite a few things that we can kind of delve into with that. So right at the basics, if you've got a new dog, and that could be a puppy, it could be a dog that's new to you, we want to just work on some basic confidence thing. And that might be going out, finding a nice bench in a sort of quiet area and just sitting, watching the world go by and sort of just feeding the dogs some yummy sort of treats when they see different things in the environment, even if they don't really have a negative or worried response to it, just starting to build some kind of positive associations so that we're kind of just building that confidence gradually. We can always also do it sort of more intentional based, and there's some really super easy games that we can teach our dogs that we can then use in situations to help build that confidence and that relationship with us, because that's often a really important part as well. So things like pattern games, so things like the up and down game, where you literally just put a treat on the floor, the dog eats the treat, they look back at you, you put another treat on the floor, and you keep repeating that. That's a super simple game that we can play in a couple of different situations that becomes really predictable for the dog. So it builds that confidence because they're like, oh, I know what I'm doing now. And we can then pair that with different situations like being in the waiting room or being in a park while other stuff is going on. Um, so we can kind of do little things like that to build that confidence really generally. And then in terms of sort of building that confidence around us and building that relationship with people, again, there's other games that we can play, and really great ones normally involve some form of play. So it could be sort of tuggy type games if your dog's like that. It could be ball games or retrieve type games if that's what your dog's into. And a really super game that most dogs really enjoy is some form of scent work. So using their nose, and that's a really great way to work together to build confidence, because you could just be hiding bits of cheese on a fallen log while you're on a walk or around the house and helping the dog kind of find that cheese together. They're using their nose, they're getting all of those kind of feel good feelings and hormones, and we're helping them achieve that, which really strengthens that bond and then helps build their confidence. um and you mentioned something really interesting earlier about Teddy, and you said, he put the point that he probably wouldn't cope anymore is if somebody tried to take something out of his mouth. And often we think like, oh, well, that's bad. Like we should be able to do that with our dogs. But if I'm eating and somebody comes over to my plate, they're pretty quickly going to find out that I'm not going to share, and that's probably going to involve being poked with a fork. So we also we resource guard, and my friend wrote a talk about resource guarding and used one of the memes from Friends of Joey, which is like, oh, Joey doesn't share food. And it always makes me laugh because we see it as this bad thing, but we lock our houses when we go out, we lock our cars, we move, we have, if we go abroad and we're feeling a little bit unsafe, then we might have a money belt under our clothes. So we resource card, we just don't label it that way. However, saying that, obviously it doesn't fit very well into a human world because dogs have teeth, and they're pretty sharp, and we don't really want them to learn to use them. So what we can do instead is teach them that people approaching them while they've got food, or um, swapping items for food is really great, or another toy or a game. So it becomes a bit more of a game, and they learn that people coming towards them is actually a really good thing. And what we might do is walk a little bit towards them. They see us, we throw some treats, and we walk away again. And then we build up to the point where we're able to actually ask them to drop the item and do a swap. And that's how we could build confidence in that specific situation that we were talking about. And the flip side of that is also we can think about, well, what behaviors do we want to see? And we can start to teach them to actually bring us things. And that's another really useful tool for dogs who do struggle a little bit with letting go of items. Is actually if we teach them the best thing in the world is to bring something to us, then if they do pick up something like a sock or they've gone into the bin, they're going to come straight to us with the item and drop it at our feet because they want some yummy treats, which is obviously a much better way of kind of dealing with that situation.
I'm just smiling because one of the best things I ever did was teach Teddy that instead of eating banana peels that he finds, he gets his absolute favorite treat, which is a duck neck. That's like the ultimate thing that I use whenever it looks like he's got something that he shouldn't have, but he's not going to want to relinquish it because he's
Mm.
just it. And I just say those two words and it is dropped immediately. But we now have banana peel hunts. He can smell a banana peel, I think, miles away. He's off. He goes into shrubs and he, rather than eating it, waves it at me. Or he stands in a pose like he's about to guard it. And I say, "Oh, have you got something?" And then he'll pick it up and wave it at me. And sometimes he'll bring it, sometimes he'll leave it there and just come and get his prize. But that arrived that situation was important because he's allergic to bananas, but he loves bananas. So banana peels, apparently, it doesn't matter whether they have rotted to the point where they look like leather. He can still identify them.
Oh, lovely.
But that's what we're talking about, isn't it? That that trust and that learning that actually it's okay to relinquish this because something good will come of it, something better will come of it. And I can remember playing tug with him as a puppy and teaching him that if he dropped the tug or if he gave me the tug, he'd get it back, he'd get another game out of it. So everything you're saying there is really rather wonderful. We've been talking a lot about dogs that kind of begin their lives with us, the puppies that come in. But I guess the question I asked towards the beginning of our conversation was, are some dogs going to get more frustrated more easily purely because they're on a shorter fuse because of experiences they've had? And I'm just wondering about rescue dogs. And I know that that's you specialize in working with rescues. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so like we kind of talked a little bit about earlier, those previous expectations and that previous learning is really important. And one of the difficulties when we're working with a rescue dog is we often don't know the background. So we don't know what their previous expectations are. So we don't know what sort of interactions they've had with owners, whether they've been positive or negative, or what that looks like, which can, when we're talking about frustration, can then be quite tricky because it's really hard to avoid not meeting expectations if you don't know what those expectations are. And the learning comes into it as well. And we've talked a little bit about that too, because again, dogs generally do what works for them. And the more they do it and the more it works, the more reinforced that behavior becomes, the more likely it's going to happen. And again, if we don't know what that learnings look like, it can be really tricky then to kind of avoid those situations happening. And that's why it's super important with those dogs as well that we are looking at that meeting their needs piece and we're building that confidence and that trust really early on once a rescue dog comes into our house before we then start adding different layers of complexity to the situation. So before we start asking more things of them, like lots of visitors coming over or going to a really busy place, we want to make sure that we've got those foundations to start with. So straight from the get-go, we're starting to kind of change that perception of um their expectations, and we're starting to make expectations really clear in a positive way for them so that we can kind of get past any previous learning that they've had.
And that's going to come down to staying calm and watching, listening, and building trust, isn't it?
Yeah, and just taking things slowly. So thinking about kind of, we all get dogs for a reason, and often that's because we want to do nice long walks and then go for a dinner somewhere or, do things like that, go out with our friends. And when we get a new dog, we're not saying that that's not possible. But to start with, we just want to kind of keep things quiet and we really want to focus on building that relationship with that initial family unit. So that could just be you and the dog, it could be you and a partner and a dog, whatever your house looks like. We want to focus on just really building that relationship. And those games that we talked about earlier can be really useful when we first bring a dog home, to kind of have a quiet few days and just do some shorter walks and focus on some nice sort of mental enrichment and fun things that we can do with the dog to build those bonds. Um, and then as we go through, we can gradually introduce them to more situations and build up to those ideals of what we had in our mind when we took our dog home. But yeah, definitely initially, we want to keep things super easy, super quiet, and focus on building that confidence and building that trust and approaching situations together as a team, rather than just kind of saying, well, this is what I want to do, and the dog's going to come with me.
A lot of what we've been talking about has been applicable to what goes on in the home, but we often hear about lead frustration. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, definitely. So that generally tends to be like the biggest problem related to frustration that we see is a dog who maybe wants to get to another dog or wants to see some people, can't, and then that behavior is displayed as kind of lunging and barking, or what we might sort of label as reactive. And that can be challenging because that's then difficult. It makes it less fun to take your dog out on a walk. Often we feel embarrassed if we've got a dog who's kind of barking on the end of the lead. Um, and frustration plays a big part in that. And again, similarly, what we kind of want to do in those situations is making sure that we've met those needs and then thinking about other behaviors that might be more appropriate. So to start with, what we might just do is when we see other dogs on or see something on the lead that we think our dog's going to get frustrated by, we might just want to start dropping some treats in the grass or next to us so that instead of sort of lunging and barking, they can start to find some treats. And eventually what we want to do is wait a little bit until the dog's seen the other thing. And hopefully they're starting to learn that other things mean treats. And they start to look back at us, which is a really great point to say, yes, well done, that's what we want. And then we drop the treats. And we're gradually kind of changing that perception and that approach to seeing the other thing out and about. So rather than getting frustrated because they can't get there, they know what to do instead. And then gradually we can kind of reduce that distance to the point where hopefully we can walk past the thing, the other dog, the other person, and not really have to worry about it too much. But it is difficult, and it's really important that we kind of do that because then eventually what we can also do is teach the dog that if they look back at us, sometimes they might be able to go and see the other thing. And that's really reinforcing because that's often the thing that they're wanting to do. That's why they're getting frustrated in the first place. So if we can teach them, this is how you access the thing you want by looking back and asking if it's okay. And sometimes it will be, and then you can get it, and sometimes it won't be, but this other really great thing will happen. And that's how we're going to start to build our dog's ability to cope with those frustrating situations.
How can we tell whether the lunging and the barking is frustration or anxiety? Is there, because we know that they're highly aroused, but how can we differentiate between frustration and anxiety? Because the behavior may look very, very similar, if not exactly the same.
Yeah, so sometimes it definitely can, and sometimes we can have emotional conflict, which is where the dogs are kind of feeling a bit of both. So I'm a little bit worried about that other dog, but I'm on a lead, so I also can't get away, which is then going to be frustrating because they want to get away and they can't. So sometimes we get the two together, which is even more complicated. So sometimes it can be fairly obvious if it's fear or frustration, and that could be based on the body language that we're seeing from the dog. It could be based on um, what the dog does after when the other dog leaves, like if they're really keen to get to where that dog was before, or if they're just happy that the dog's gone and they want to kind of go the other direction. And there's other factors that we consider as well, like the previous history. So, for example, I was working with a dog this week who lunges and barks on lead, but the staff at the rescue were telling me that before, when she was in previously, she used to be able to mix with dogs. She played really nicely. She seemed to really enjoy being around dogs. Well, and we weren't aware of any sort of negative incident that had happened, and that's kind of the important part. So it seems more likely that that dog is going to be frustrated rather than fearful because they seem to have had quite good experience with dogs in the past. So we can use that kind of information that we know about the dog, how the behavior kind of looks at the minute, and then sometimes what we might also have to do is look at the type of situations where things happen. So sometimes we can have a dog who's really good with other dogs off lead, but then really struggles on lead. And again, that might be quite a good indication that dogs are frustrated. Um, but again, that's where having sort of a really experienced behavior professional can help to kind of tweak that. And then we can look at what that means for our training. Because when we first start training, it generally doesn't matter too much if your dog's really worried or they're really frustrated because you're going to do a similar thing. So starting at that distance where they do cope and just rewarding them for being nice and calm and not showing the behaviors that we don't want. But it's then as we start to get closer that we might need to sort of tweak our plan based on what the driver for that behavior is.
Good. Well, you talk about the the help of an experienced trainer behaviorist. So I guess we need to know how people can find you.
Ah, yeah, great. Yes, so I run a Facebook page called Simplifying Shelter Behavior. So that's kind of the best place to find me. That's where all my information goes to what I'm up to. I've also got a podcast, which is aimed at people working in shelter, but is hopefully useful for everybody, and that's called Simplifying Shelter Behavior as well. And if you are looking for a behaviorist, sort of generally, the best advice really is to kind of look at their website, see what sort of things they're doing, and then just give them a ring and ask them some questions about how they would deal with certain situations and just see if that matches kind of what you have in your head. Or even better, sort of look for reputable organizations that those people are members of, or speak to people who've worked with that person and get that kind of first-hand feedback from people who have worked with them.
Wonderful. I'll be putting a link to everything that you're up to in the
Oh,
description.
brilliant.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Ah, thank you for having me. It's been really good fun, and I'm glad I got to virtually meet Teddy.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.